joined us today. My name is Becky Anderson. I work for Macmillan, and we're going to listen to the fabulous Tracy Gardner talk to us today about 10 ways to use social media in the writing classroom. The way these webinars work is before Tracy starts, I just want to sort of go over some of the rules. There are a number of you on the phone or on the webinar, so we have muted everyone who's attending. I apologize. If you have questions when Tracy is presenting, you can use the chat or the Q&A features. So in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there's a little blue button for chat and a blue button for Q&A. Simply type in your questions there, and we will answer them at the conclusion of the presentation. So type in your questions as Tracy's going along, and then we'll read them all aloud, and Tracy will answer them at the end. I think that's all. Oh, and we are recording this presentation, so we will post the recording in a week or two, and I will let everybody know when that happens. And Tracy has some follow-up documents that we'll also get to you. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Tracy Gardner from Virginia Tech, who's going to talk to us about 10 ways to use social media in the writing classroom. Tracy, I think you have the power to go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, I have the power. Right. There we go.
There we go. I can see your Snapchat.
Yeah. For some reason, my dock is not pulling up. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay.
There we go.
So as Becky said, I'm going to talk about 10 ways to use social media, and as she mentioned, I'm going to have a handout that will get mailed out to all of you after the session with the recording link that will have all of the links that I talk about so that you don't have to try to write everything down while I'm going along. So I'm going to share 10 ways you can use social media to meet goals in your writing classroom. But before I talk about those 10 ways, I wanted to go over a little bit of background information. To begin with, we need to have a shared definition of social media. Social media is comprised of a large collection of digital tools that people use to create and share text, which we define rather broadly, not just words on the screen, but also visual images, sound, and things like that. This social media prism that's on the screen right now was developed by Brian Solis. This is version 4 of it, and it tries to categorize the different kinds of social media that exist. If you zoom in on it, you can see that social media includes things like wikis, blogging, image and video sharing, texting, live streaming, and much, much more. The good news about all of that is that you don't actually have to know how to use every one of those tools to take advantage of social media in the classroom. In fact, you can use a few simple tools to accomplish some cool learning. And that brings me to the other piece of background information, why use social media? William Ferreter shared this image on his blog last July that I think gets right to the point of why we would use social media. As you can see, the wrong reasons to have kids, or in our case, college students, use technology is to have them learn tools like making a Prezi or creating a Wordle. The right reasons have to do with things like engaging in conversations, taking action, and completing research. The goal is never social media for social media's sake. It's to engage students in activities that support their development as writers. As Ferreter points out, technology is a tool, not a learning outcome. I've talked also about some of the reasons to use social media in the classroom in a recent Bedford Bits blog post on teaching with social media that includes the same ideas. For instance, social media can help students connect with an authentic audience. When students post images on Instagram or publish presentations on Prezi, they are sharing their text with an audience that reaches far beyond the classroom. So the 10 ways of talking about social media in the classroom that I'm going to talk about, I've divided into 4 broad categories: exploring online identity, connecting as a community, conducting research and analysis, and focusing on critical thinking and creativity. So I'm going to just go ahead and dive right into exploring online identity. And the first activity I have is literacy narratives. Now, you may have done literacy narratives before, but this particular kind of literacy narrative I try to focus specifically on social media. This kind of assignment helps students establish a baseline for how they use social media so that as the term goes on, they can look back at where they started. And it helps me as an instructor learn about the social media that they are familiar with and their level of mastery with those tools. So in this particular example that I have here, and I'm going to try to pop out, or not, there we go, and play a snippet of this video for you. This is a digital literacy narrative that features Jen Michaels, and she's reflecting on her role as the DALN social media coordinator. In this section of the video, she's talking about how she became the coordinator, about her experiences before she became the coordinator and how they helped her realize how social media was shaping who she is. So here we go. And it's not playing.
And I was sitting in this big panel session called Is Blogging Dead? And I was tweeting during the session in what we call the back channel. So like even though they weren't projecting pictures of the tweets on the board, there were a lot of people in the room who were using Twitter to communicate during the panel about what was going on in that room. And after the panel, a couple of people like came up to me and shook my hand, and they're like, oh, it's so good to finally meet you in person. And I couldn't believe that these professors, you know, these people with tenure who way outranked me in the field, knew who I was and knew what I thought about things. And so even though I knew at some kind of subconscious level that when you're on Twitter, you're broadcasting your thoughts to the world, and of course I kind of knew that in a way, to actually meet people in real life who had interacted with me that way was really kind of, it changed my understanding of social media.
Okay, so as you can see, she's telling her story and she's reflecting on how social media has become part of what she does. Let me scoot back over to here. Oops, all right, well, we'll fast forward. The DALN that she talks about is the Digital Archive of Literacy Narratives from the Ohio State University. And it's really one of the best places to start if you want to do an assignment focused on literacy narratives, either about social media or anything else for that matter. The archive collects audio, video, and text versions, like text words-based versions of literacy narratives. And you can see from this table of contents that they have a huge collection of resources to help support you as you are working on literacy narratives. Students can find a definition of a literacy narrative and work through information on how to tell their story and how to record it. Even if your students aren't going to publish their literacy narratives on the DALN site, it's a really good resource for this kind of an activity. The second activity I wanted to talk about is online identity statements. And I got the assignment that I've used most recently. I asked students to create a statement of their online identity that was composed of a digital image and a short explanatory text. This assignment that I created was inspired by a guest post on the Bedford Bits blog, excerpted in this little image, by Jean Law Bohannon and Kim Hames-Korn, which asked students to make badges that communicated their identity in a particular discourse community. Now, I had them dig down a little bit further and look particularly at social media. So in the assignment, students used an image that combined some visual images with some linguistic text and then provided an explanation of how that communicated something about their social media experience and who they were online. So here, this is an excerpt from one of my students that shows her image at the top and part of her explanation at the bottom. Like the literacy narrative, this assignment asks students to reflect upon how they use social media and challenges them to express something about their identity using digital multimedia tools. The third activity is digital identity mapping, and you can ask students to use a simple tool like this to catalog their social media experience. This example is a digital identity mapping grid from Fred Caveza. Students can create a similar grid that maps out the different places that they inhabit in line and then work from their grid to think about how the different parts make up their online identity. I created a simple Google Doc form that they could fill in with their information. From their maps, once they filled out this information, they could then go on to write a reflection, and this could actually be a starting point for one of the literacy narratives or online identity statements. They could start here gathering their ideas and then move on to one of the other projects. So those are 3 different ways that you might explore online identity with social media. The next category I wanted to talk about was ways you can use social media to connect as a community. And the one that I use probably more than anything else is class brainstorming. The social part of social media means that these digital tools can be a boon for class collaboration and discussion. One great way to collaborate is to use class brainstorming. I use the tool Padlet, which is essentially an online whiteboard and is perfect for online brainstorming. This image is part of a collection of topics students brainstormed in class before they got into small groups to choose a focus for group oral presentations. I also use Padlet to begin class discussions. Frequently when I pitch out a question, there's a lot of silence as they all try to figure out what the right answer is. Instead, I used Padlet to pitch my question. In this case, it was about recent readings on defining online identity, and asked them to think about the good and the bad ways that identity is represented online. I usually use the settings that allow anyone with a link to post to the Padlet, and students then can contribute their ideas anonymously. And by the end of the brainstorming session, we have a board full of ideas. The anonymity reduces any fear of failure. No one knows who posts the ideas on the board, so students are more willing to take risks, and I eliminate that large silence that often happens. Padlets are saved online so you can refer to them later, and another benefit of the tool is that Padlets can allow users to post images and videos in addition to traditional words and phrases. So you could use Padlet for an image-based brainstorming session if you wanted to. I also use social media for peer review and commenting. Google Docs actually does count as social media because it's a collaborative tool where people can publish their texts together online. I found that students share their work with one another online and use digital tools to add comments and suggestions using Google Docs, and it seems to work fairly well. Using the system, they tend to make strong comments, asking for examples, pointing out places that need more explanation, and making suggestions for a revision. And this is not really the best image of that. However, I had a really hard time finding a picture of a student's text with a comment that didn't have any personal information in it. So it's a good example, but it's not necessarily the best image of an example. I think part of the reason students do so well when we ask them to comment online using tools like Google Docs is that they're used to commenting in social media. They've become experts at liking, retweeting, upvoting, and commenting. When people comment on blogs, news stories, and other online texts, they are engaging in the same kind of feedback that we ask students to practice as they complete peer review activities. When we talk about commenting on social media in the classroom, we can make direct comparisons to the feedback students are given in peer review, and we can ask them to follow similar social media guidelines when they're writing good comments or whether they're doing peer review. And I've got two examples that will be in the handout on how to talk about writing great blog comments, and then you can springboard from there into writing good peer review comments. We can also encourage students to connect with social media by modeling good commenting when we interact with them in social media spaces. So if my students are posting blog posts, I want to respond to those with comments that encourage them and provide feedback in the same way that I want them to provide encouragement and feedback to others in the class. The third big category I wanted to talk about was conducting research and analysis. And I'm going to start with what I'm calling pattern analysis. If you're familiar with Wordles, you know what's on the screen already. One of the benefits of working with digital files is the ability to find patterns in text. Using social media word clouds, students can uncover interesting details about the text they write or analyze. Wordle and Tuxedo are great tools for this kind of analysis. For both, you paste in text from a document or provide the link to a web page where the text exists, and the tool builds a word cloud that highlights the most frequently used words in the text, like this cloud for Shakespeare's 18th sonnet. Tuxedo has the added benefit of shaping the word cloud into an image. So for the word cloud for Shakespeare's sonnet is in the shape of a heart, and the cat on the right side of the screen is the word cloud for Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat, and it's shaped as a cat. Beyond the fun gimmick of rearranging the words, these word clouds can become analytical tools as students look for the words used most frequently and notice which ones stand out. I had students create word clouds using text from their job application materials and then ask them to think about whether the words that stand out lead to the impression that they want to make. Now, they may need to edit their file before they actually complete this activity because they would want to remove personal information and things that aren't necessarily important to the overall picture, like the names of the towns where they live or something, which would probably show up multiple times and might be a big word on the screen, but they're not really part of the message that they're making. most of the students, when I did this activity, quickly found that they were overusing certain adjectives and pronouns in the ways that they were talking about them. And like this one, she has high up there. She kept saying she did high achievements in this, that, and the other, and she realized she needed to be a bit more, she needed a bit more variety in what she was doing. So the most obvious way to use social media for research and analysis is probably to talk about Wikipedia. Wikipedia entries can change frequently, and sometimes those changes are more subjective than objective. I would probably start talking about a specific current event that might help students understand how things can be published on Wikipedia that are not necessarily what we might think of as objective fact. And an example of this is the Gamergate controversy. You could start with some articles. I have one here from Forbes, the September article on the Gamergate controversy, and the Guardian article on how Wikipedia voted to be in some of the editors from gender-related articles in January this year. Beginning with that kind of a conversation before they actually get to the text helps them understand that the information in the resource is constantly changing, and that whoever is editing the text actually has a great deal to do with what the entry actually says. After an introductory conversation about how research and social media work, I would demonstrate how to look at the information on the Wikipedia site itself so that users can determine how accurate and relevant the entry is. And I've pulled up just the very top of the Gamergate controversy page, and I'm going to try to get my mouse over here. I would ask them to look at the Talk tab, where they can look at the background conversations about what's actually in that particular entry, and to look at the history to see how people have changed it and who has changed it in what ways. There are also sometimes icons on a particular entry. Sometimes there'll be one that says that the entry is about a developing event, and so it might be locked down or it could be changing quickly. This one has a little lock that tells us that this particular article or entry is only changed after it's been reviewed by the administrative editors. It's not, you can't immediately make a change to this particular one. I'd also ask them to look at the resources that were used in writing that entry by coming to the bottom of the entry and looking at the notes, the references, and the external links. And it doesn't actually have to be a controversy like this particular one. It could just be something that's happened recently. For instance, when Michael Jackson died, there was a lot of activity on his page with people coming in and trying to make changes and updates, and it was rapidly evolving. And so that was another article that could be used to talk about how things change very quickly and who makes changes and how. If you do want to conduct research using Wikipedia, the best thing to do is to take a look at this Prof Hacker article that was posted last week with a thorough explanation of how to integrate Wikipedia in your courses. The article goes through the guidelines for exactly how to work on the Wikipedia site. There are specific guidelines that they ask you to follow. They don't necessarily welcome a whole batch of students to come onto the site and attack a certain area, trying to get it pulled into view. They actually want you to follow their guidelines. They want to know when students are coming in, and they will work with you. If you prefer something other than Wikipedia, you might look for a wiki that is on a similar topic, but not in Wikipedia. There are a lot of fan sites around, as well as special topic sites that you can use. And another option would be to set up your own wiki site, or to use a free hosting site like PBWorks or Wikispace. One of my favorite tools is Storify, and Storify can let students work more independently than Wikipedia. They can each individually write their own story using Storify, and I can call it social mediated research. The way that the Storify tool works, students can use information posted via social media with a tool like Storify to build research projects that tap the most current resources available. Of course, they still need to pay attention to issues about subjectivity and do some fact checking on what they're going to use, but they can come up with some pretty interesting pieces. The Storify interfaces lets writers drag and drop information from various social media sites like Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, and I'm just going to point to a couple of things on the slide here. You can search all of these different spaces typing in your words. So right now I have a search for Selma Oscars and it's just a search of the web. So there were various stories over here, and I can pick up one of those stories and drag it into the story that I'm writing over here. You can add text to introduce your different blocks. You can add videos. Anything that's over here can be dragged into the story over here. And then when you publish it, you get a nice, pretty multimodal text. Where am I? Storify is perfect for research projects that get beyond words because students can integrate those images and text really nicely. In a lot of ways, I feel like Storify is the future of research essays. It still allows students to add their own text to surround those quotes that they're pulling from social media and to blend it all into a nice paper. And you will find examples of Storify being used in the media. Some newspapers use it to piece together happenings, current events as they're happening, picking together Twitter updates and their own web pages and the like. So the last category I was going to talk about is focusing on critical thinking and creativity, and I have 3 student texts that I was going to use for this. Of course, anytime a student posts a photo or on Instagram or writes a Facebook post about why she loves or hates a recent TV show, a video game, or a movie, she is using social media for critical thinking and creativity. I tried to take things a little bit further and ask students to create some texts or to create some projects that rethought existing texts. In the Writing and Digital Media course that I teach, I ask students to remix a story in ways that get beyond words on a page or a screen and to take advantage of the possibilities that digital media affords. One student I taught last fall created, it would be easier to go get it, a rethinking of Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days. And I'm just going to kind of scroll in. Well, maybe not. Maybe we'll do it this way. What he did was he pulled together resources from the novel itself, vintage postcards. He used clips from, or stills from the David Niven movie and the Jackie Chan movie. Because he was a glider pilot, he created flight plans for each step in the voyage. And he published all of this on Prezi, and you can actually zoom in on this, and the links will include the link to these projects so that you can actually look at them. So he has his official flight plans, and when he talked to me about this project, he said it was sometimes tricky because for the time that the novel was written, they sometimes, in a normal flight plan, you would want more information than would have been available. So he had to make some things up. And he goes through all the different places. It's a kind of cool project. Another one that a student did was a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood. And what she did was she retold the story through a series of Twitter updates, Instagram posts, and other ephemera in a police investigation board format that she's also published in Prezi. If I let it zoom in. So she has a Twitter feed. She has some little Post-it notes. If I move it up, here's some photos that are taken. And she works through the whole story trying to figure out who it was. Her peer review feedback, she's got her Have You Missing Child poster. Her peer review feedback told her that she should have some suspects. So she has, her main subject is the wolf, but she has Scar, Robin Hood, and the Beast as also possible suspects for the particular event. She actually faked the images in her presentation in Photoshop because she was pretty good at Photoshop. But there are also tools like Fakebook and Simitator that will let you create fake Snapchats and fake Facebook postings and fake Twitter updates and fake Instagram. They're framed sort of as how you can prank your friends, but they work really well for a project like this. I also had a student, I wanted to show one that was a little bit more text-based. I had a student who loved Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and she likes the Post Secrets website, which is a website that publishes postcards from anonymous senders who reveal personal secrets. So she did a mashup of those two things and created a site based on Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets that shared postcards that Jenny Weasley would send to the Post Secret site. So we're to assume that this happened over time. So she has a crush on Harry Potter. She found someone's diary and it's been talking back to her. And she just worked through a bunch of different moments in the movie from Jenny's perspective and wrote them up on postcards. She actually made the postcards and then took photos of them and uploaded them to her blog. And then she eventually gets to happiness at the end. Harry Potter saves her life. So she put a lot of work into creating her cards and pulling it together, and it's maybe not as flashy as one of the Prezzies, but it's still a pretty strong project. The other kind, excuse me, back to the PowerPoint. The other technique is to build new texts. This is number 10. I wanted to talk about some activities where students can build new text inspired by current text or current events. One of my Bedford Bits posts recently talked about assignments that were inspired by the literary Starbucks site. That site publishes descriptions of Starbucks orders for various authors and characters. This one is for George R.R. Martin. Some of the posts are conversations between the barista and the character or the author. And I thought that students might do something similar by choosing another topic and creating their own collections for various authors, characters, excuse me, historical figures, or people in the news, like an Evernote collection of somebody's shopping lists and to-dos, Instagram photos of recent purchases, or Amazon reviews of recent movies. In another another activity, students create Snapchat mashups inspired by last fall's BuzzFeed article on 28 Snapchats from Harry Potter. The BuzzFeed article shares a compilation of Snapchat-like images that mash up a Harry Potter image with pop culture comments and puns. My favorite is the Snapchat version. I am so sorry. The last activity I wanted to talk about was creating Pinterest boards that relate to what your students are studying. I've begun a board of job application advice that I use with my tech writing students, and I'm thinking about ways that students might build their own boards of relevant resources for a particular topic that we're studying in class. I think Pinterest boards can also be a wonderful way to collect images and videos that relate to a research project. Students might take the viewpoint of a first-person witness to a historical event and create a pin board that illustrates what that person saw or noticed. For instance, what might you have collected if you were on Wall Street during the week of the stock market crash in 1929? So all of those 10 things are ways that you can use social media in the classroom. I know that that is a lot of stuff and it came at you very quickly, and there are thousands more options for things that you can do with social media in the classroom. So I would like to invite you to continue this conversation on the Teaching Rhetoric, the Rhetoric of Social Media group on Facebook. It is a closed group in that you have to be approved to join it, but pretty much anybody can join it. It's mainly just to keep the teachers in there, to keep the spam bots out. You can find more details on the group and how it works at that URL that's at the bottom of the page, and it will also be linked in the handout that Becky will send to you after all of this. So with that, I think that's everything that I was planning to go over, and I guess I'm ready for questions, Becky.
Okay. My first one is not a question, but your students are wildly creative, and it makes me feel a little bad about myself, but that's a separate issue. On Padlet, how do you assure that all of your students are participating?
I walk around the classroom and I look at them. It's pretty straightforward, in the same way I would make sure that they were participating in any event or anything that was going on in the classroom.
Okay.
It's pretty obvious to me whether or not they've got Padlet pulled up on their computer or they have Facebook pulled up on their computer.
Okay. That's reasonable.
Yeah.
For Tagzito, is there a benefit to the shape part of it that makes it different from Wordle, or is that's just a fun part of it?
I don't think for analysis there's any great difference. I just think it makes it a little bit more fun, and it can give students the chance to make the Wordle, the word cloud itself, I should say, more of an end product, so that they might incorporate a word cloud into something else that they were doing. They might want it to be shaped to just give it a little bit more creativity and communicate things a little bit differently. Obviously, the spatial mode of communication is at play there when you're shaping the words in a heart as opposed to just having them laid out on the screen in a horizontal manner.
And so there were a lot of ideas in here. In your typical single semester, would you use all of these, or is this something that, you know, once a week you might do something like what's the frequency here? And I apologize for my dog.
Well, I coughed, so dogs are welcome. The way that the class that I'm using these ideas in the most is writing in digital media. So we are completely focused on how to write with digital tools. And I would guess I'm using probably one of each of the 4 categories at some point during the term, but I'm certainly not doing all 10 of these activities. As an example, their big remix a story project that they do at the end, I would give them the different kinds of examples that I showed, like I would show them the Literary Starbucks, I'll show them the Around the World in 80 Days Prezi, I'll show them the Little Red Riding Hood thing, and just tell them these are examples, and then I try to make it a passion project and let them choose how they want to go about it and how they want to do it. So I just try to give them options and let them go from there. I'm certainly not trying to ask them to do all of these things every session or every term.
So does that mean, do you think some of these topics or approaches are appropriate for a, you know, a Comp 1, Comp 2 basic level course?
Sure. In fact, the Padlet image that I showed of the group conversations, the group brainstorming, that was for presentation topics. That actually was a first-year Comp class. And I would use them. It's sort of, a lot depends on what your composition program allows you to do. We have some set things that we're supposed to get through, but one of them is literacy narrative, so I would easily be able to fit any of those first 3 things in there and ask them to do a literacy narrative on their social media experience or fill out the online identity map. I probably have less range to do some of the things where they're being more creative, but I would absolutely use Storify as a research tool in a first-year Comp class. I just haven't had the chance because I'm teaching mainly tech writing right now.
How is the use of social media improving the quality of student writing in terms of both skills and content?
I think the biggest way that it improves things is their understanding of audience. Once they realize that everybody in the classroom is going to read what they're doing, as well as people outside the classroom. Like the first time somebody gets a comment or a like or something along those lines from somebody who's not actually part of the classroom but is interested in the topic, it sort of changed their perspective. In the same way in that little video clip that I showed of Jen Michaels talking about how she had done a lot of social networking and using social media, but until she was in that conference session and people came up to her and said, you know, I'm so happy to meet you, she didn't have a, you know, she sort of understood her audience, but she really, her understanding of audience grew as she put faces to people and had an understanding of how much it reaches beyond just the space that they're in. Does that get at the question? Was there more to it?
I think so. We'll see. She can always write more. Someone asked, will we share the PowerPoint? Yes. When I think when the presentation is over, we have this recorded. Right. We'll post a whole bunch of things for you guys to access afterwards because there was a ton of information here.
And
another question, do you use these techniques for any developmental writing classes?
I haven't taught a developmental writing class in a very long time, but I would certainly use Padlet. I think I would use with almost anybody who could actually type. I mean, it's a very simple tool. You double-click on the screen, you put text up there, and since it can be used anonymously, there's less risk for students as they work. I think that some developmental students might need a little bit more hand-holding because there's a lot coming at them. But I mean, in some cases, these kinds of tools can actually liberate a developmental student because they may have great expertise working with images or video that don't come across when we limit them to just putting words on a sheet of paper. So I would absolutely use these tools with developmental students.
Good point. Do you worry that some of this, especially Storify, encourages plagiarism or could lead students down that road?
Well, I mean, everything we do could encourage plagiarism if we go about it the wrong way. I try to model how to use these texts. If I'm using Storify, I want to talk about how you have to frame your quotations or your videos, whatever your resources are that you're bringing in, just as you would talk about how you have to frame resources if this were a traditional essay on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper that you printed out. So I think it has to do with how you approach things and how you talk about them, more than whether or not the tools are going to encourage that. I try to model the behavior, and I tend to do a lot of walking around the classroom and looking at what students are doing and asking them to show me things. And they usually bring the questions to me. They're most worried about how to document their photos more than anything else I've found. They want to know how they can indicate where they got the particular picture that they're using as an illustration for a blog post or that sort of thing.
And what is student feedback then for this? Are students, is it more work, or are they happy because it's more where they're used to being?
I don't know. Part of the one course that I'm teaching is writing in digital media, so, I mean, their expectation is that they're going to be engaging with digital media. I give them time to work on things in class, and we work in groups and things in class. So I try to use that strategy to make sure that they don't get stuck with a technology problem, that there's always time in class for me to help you one-on-one if you need it. And, of course, office hours and all of that sort of stuff. I think that they tend to like it as long as you stay away from what's called the creepy treehouse. I try to make sure that creepy treehouse is this idea that's been around for a while, where like the analogy is, kids build a treehouse in the backyard and then your creepy Uncle Fred wants to be in it with you all the time, and that's just not right. You just want to be up there playing. So like if a teacher wants to friend everybody on Facebook, that can get kind of creepy, and they don't like that sort of thing. But as long as I keep things siloed so that the things that they're working on for the class are actually just focused on the class. Like I don't ask them to friend me, and I don't friend them on Facebook, but we might use a Facebook group because those are separate and they don't overlap. I also try to be careful that the things that they use in social media, I at least want them to be aware if I can't stop it, so that the things that they post maybe for my class are not necessarily also going out to everyone in their sorority, because that can be awkward as well. So I think that they like it as long as you can keep it separate from their social media presence that is more personal. I mean, you have to talk about audience and purpose and how to keep your online identities correct for the space that you're writing in.
That makes sense. I will give people another minute or two to see if anybody else has any questions, but I have to say, I thought this was great, and I have written down some notes for myself for things that I want to try out, actually, for some of our presentations that we do. So I thought this was great. Thank you very much, Tracy, for doing this, and everyone who's on, we'll get you a whole bunch of tools. Probably next week, we'll get the recordings and we'll get the files, and so you guys can go and hopefully start using some of this in your classes. So I think that's it for today. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to everyone later.
Bye.
Bye.